I played through 100% of Dave the Diver, and here's what happened. Hi friends, and welcome back to Dave the Diver. I previously played through 100 days of this fishing and restaurant management game, and while I originally thought that I could 100% the game in that time, boy was I wrong. So I set out to finish my original mission no matter how long it took. And this is the story of how that came to pass. So here we go. I finally 100% completed Dave the Diver. Loading up my old 100-day save, this endeavor began on day 101, where I was ready to do whatever it took to achieve that glorious 100% completion. And just so we're clear on what 100% completion means to me, I mean that I wanted to have all recipes unlocked and level them up to their maximum. I wanted to hire every staff member in the game and train each and every one of them to the maximum level of 20. I wanted to complete all 3-star Moringa cards, finish every Eco Watcher mission, collect every single Fishmon, finish all of the Sea People quests, raise every Gyao, unlock every achievement, and complete every single DLC for the game. Now obviously, that's a pretty large undertaking, but fortunately, I already had a whole 100 days under my belt, and that put me in a pretty great starting position. So just as a warning, if you haven't seen that 100 days video, you'll be missing out on quite a lot of the baseline of what got us to this point in the first place. For this video, I also picked up the 2 DLCs that were out that I hadn't included in my original video, the Dredge DLC and the Ichiban's Holiday DLC. I waited to try the Dredge DLC for Dave the Diver until I had played the actual Dredge game, which I did and I quite enjoyed and may return to at some point in the future, but I wanted to understand at least some of what I was getting myself into before making Dave dive into those cursed depths. As it turns out, waiting wouldn't have spoiled my Dredge experience because the DLC definitely functions differently from the actual game, but both were enjoyable for different reasons. The first hints of this DLC on day 107 of my save, where a thick, creepy fog covered the blue hole. This fog changes nothing about your first 2 normal dives of the day, but it changes altogether come the nighttime, when the red fog rolls in. The first time this happened, I was greeted by the traveling merchant that you can find throughout Dredge's world, and she informed me that she was hunting for aberrated fish that had mutated in strange ways. And she also helpfully informed me that various hooded figures were sure to visit nearby restaurants on nights with the red mist seeking that sweet, sweet mutated flesh, and that they would pay me well, which is better than I can say for the hooded figures I found around Blackstone Isle. To help me catch and sell these aberrations, the traveling merchant gave me a very helpful light called the Skyfire, which is a name that seemed to refer to something else that I couldn't quite place. But with that brand new ship light installed, it was time to go sailing. Honestly, this was my favorite part of this DLC. The chance to pilot the dive boat around this little bay was a lot of fun, and was indeed very reminiscent of the Dredge game. Even more reminiscent of the Dredge game was the Dredge minigame that popped up whenever you encountered these small, disturbed sections of water that triggered the same quick-time style event minigame reel-in thingy that the source material relied on. I quickly learned that these dredge spots brought up crafting materials for Duff, plus some other useful stuff that I could sell to Cobra or Dua the blacksmith for some extra cash. But the real treasures of this DLC were the aberrant fish that lurked below the surface, for which you had to commit to one of 3 dive spots for your evening dive slot. Each spot was a rough equivalent to one of the main regions in Dredge. There was the Fog Coast resembling the Maros, the Black Cliffs resembling the Gale Cliffs region, and the Jellyfish Basin, which shockingly resembled the Stellar Basin, which is actually my favorite region in Dredge, so that's where I dove the most frequently. Once in the water, we returned to your standard Dave the Diver gameplay with swimming around, catching fish with your harpoon and lobster pots, and trying to avoid being eaten by horrible mutated monstrosities. In fact, every fish in these waters was the horrible, mutated, aberrated version of these fish because the rest of the game had most of the normal fish varieties pretty well covered. But do note that the Dredge game does actually have normal fish in addition to said horrible mutated aberrations. And once I had caught my fill for the night, I could return to my restaurant to sell my catch to some lovely hooded figures, who, to my knowledge, did not eat any of my normal customers. That essentially sums up what the Dredge DLC was. Bonus fishing opportunities, and a few more unique fish types to catch, but it was a nice break from the other grinds I was working towards, and it was genuinely nice to revisit a different world in a new way. Finishing out the 3-star Marinka cards for the aberrations did require a few dedicated dives to gather some of the larger, spookier fauna, but seeing that that's all that 100%ing this DLC required of me, I was pretty content to revisit some creatures I had otherwise mostly forgotten about. Considering I was already fairly late game when I first started this DLC, very few of the creatures posed any real threat, and collecting the novel Drain Gun vampiric weapon that was unique to these dives was a cool unlock, but frankly, my fully upgraded steel net gun did more than you could ever hope for from this situational Drain Gun. I do think this DLC fits a bit better if you encounter it earlier in your playthrough, where the cash injections from the aberrant fish can help you progress and train new staff more easily, as selling them is actually quite valuable. But given that I was already pretty far along and was making more than enough money to meet and fulfill the needs of my restaurant, I ended up actually turning off the option for the hooded figures to visit Bancho Sushi because I didn't want to dedicate the real life time to diving for aberrant fish whenever the fog rolled in. I did still regularly go dredge up the treasures though, just because I liked that part. I also think it's worth noting that the Dredge DLC was free, and I personally enjoyed it infinitely more than I enjoyed the Ichiban's Holiday DLC, which was the other major DLC released for this game that I hadn't already covered in my previous video. I picked it up while it was on sale, but honestly, I'm not sure I would recommend it even then. It may be obvious from the kinds of games that I showcase on this channel that I mostly prefer games that are sandboxes, survival crafting, or focused on the ocean, none of which apply to the Yakuza series that Ichiban's Holiday's characters and gameplay features. This DLC had some kind of proper narrative to it, which started by 2 people coming into my restaurant after it had closed and insulting our cocktails after we were kind enough to serve them, which is pretty rude if you ask me. Of course, that same Japanese tourist showed up in the water the next morning and was making friends with my little dolphin buddy when Sea Blue showed up. As a forewarning, very little of what I'm about to say will make sense if you aren't familiar with the main storyline of Dave the Diver. These pirates wanted to catch our dolphin buddy, which wasn't out of character for Sea Blue and John Watson, but our new human friend rightly took an issue with that. Fortunately, Cobra had the great idea on how to deal with them that involved a large explosive, which surely nothing could go wrong with that. So we agreed to meet up in the evening and attempt to deal with those pirates once and for all. We met up on the boat, then dove into the water with Dave carrying said large explosive, and of course, we immediately ran into a group of pirates who took an issue with that large explosive. I gotta say, that wasn't a terribly surprising reaction. But after a few more underwater fistfights, we got to the door of Sea Blue's base and blew it off its hinges. No more large explosive. Once inside, Cobra makes his grand entrance through an inexplicable hole in the ceiling, saying that he needs Dave to go on a quote-unquote top-secret mission to find them a way out. Like that rope dangling from the ceiling just wouldn't work all of a sudden. But anyways, this triggers the part of the DLC that I really didn't like. I can best describe it as a Street Fighter-style beat-em-up section reminiscent of old fighting games, which again, isn't a genre that I'm particularly familiar with nor enjoy. I'm just here for the fish. After throwing a lot of punches, we eventually got down to some kind of secret lair where a guy called Torben was hanging out and conducting horrible experiments on local sea life, which is not something that I can get behind. So of course, these two had the lovely solution of beating him up. A lot. Enough that his claws turned purple, and that made this guy named Majima enter this supposedly secret lair so that he could beat up Torben some more. This fight did have a timer on it, but that was no issue for a god gamer like me. And Dave did fulfill his purpose of finding an exit for the group because he showed up just in time for everybody to get out of there before the whole place blew up. And it wasn't even our large explosive this time. So after a bit of bonding time back at the restaurant, the bartender says that he wants cold noodles now, and he stupidly challenges Bancho to a cook-off. Again, if you know anything about the main game, you'd know that the bartender is destined to fail that mission. And he did, pretty spectacularly. But it unlocked our ability to grow buckwheat, and with any new ingredient comes plenty of extra dishes that I would need to then level up. Also as a side note, this cutscene ended with a weird karaoke minigame that I couldn't include because it's all copyrighted music, but just trust me, this was a weird fever dream of a cutscene. So this DLC ended up with the bartender teaching us to make better cocktails, the new buckwheat recipes to unlock and upgrade all of the way, and of course, Kasuga calling us to tell us that he left his electric wire-wrapped baseball bat behind and that we're free to use it if we found it. I wasn't going to, but it was nice that he thought of us. But with the DLC content out of the way, I continued my work towards what is arguably the most arduous and unfun part of 100%ing Dave the Diver, the recipe leveling. And one recipe in particular really set off why I consider this to be quote-unquote unfun. If you're familiar with Dave the Diver and have ever tried to 100% it for yourself, then you undoubtedly know what I'm talking about. The whole roasted shark head. This dish is introduced on literally the third day of any given playthrough, but it is the #1 barrier to getting every dish to max level, and that's because the shark heads themselves are a pain to grind. Just to summarize for those who may be unfamiliar with the game's mechanics, normally when you catch a fish, you'll get a certain number of meat pieces for that fish depending on its size, quality, rarity, etc. And sometimes you can get an additional special drop of something like a fin from a giant trevally, or a skin off of a pelican eel. Those special drops are generally used as crafting ingredients by Duff to level up your weapons, which we'll go over more in just a little bit. You can generally only get one of those special drops at best per animal, and you have to catch the fish manually to get that drop. That means that special drops can't be farmed in the aquaculture setup or farmed by bulk catching fish. So if you didn't get where I was heading with this, the one and only time that a special drop like this is used as a cooking ingredient is the white tip shark head, which is one of only 2 ingredients needed to create the whole roasted shark head dish. So despite the fact that I could have 27 white tip reef sharks sitting in the appropriate area of my aquaculture operation, none of them would ever provide me a single head when sending them to the restaurant. You have to catch every single one by hand. Now, that may not sound so bad. Just catch a few white tip reef sharks and call it quits, right? No. You see, in order to level up dishes in the sushi restaurant, Fansho requires that you obtain a certain number of ingredients so that he can pull some mythical magic and suddenly make the dish taste better and cost more. And the higher level you're trying to reach, the more of those ingredients you need to provide. So, say for instance, going from level 1 to level 2 may only take 5 pieces of a given fish meat, but going from level 9 to level 10 can take upwards of 115. Well, that's the case for our whole roasted shark head. In fact, it takes a grand total of 221 white tip shark heads to get this dish to level 10. And remember what I said about the fact that the shark heads have to be collected manually? That means that pretty much every dive for the rest of existence, I need to be picking up the white tip shark head to be making progress towards this goal. Things get even worse when you realize that these sharks aren't even a guaranteed spawn, and if you get extremely lucky, you're getting a maximum of 3 shark heads per day, roughly 1 per dive. Remember, not guaranteed, so it really averages out to a more realistic 2 a day if you're being diligent about collecting them. Literally every other dish in the entire game can be automated to some extent, with the fish farm and hiring Sammy to run the vegetable farm from you. From there, you can use the game's handy-dandy time skip mechanic to save yourself a lot of real-life time and just do the dinner service to make money, getting you back to the next day so your fish reproduce and your crops go, etc, etc. Theoretically, that's a great endgame cycle. You have all of these fish duplicating themselves in the aquaculture operation, you have crops growing and someone you can hire to harvest them, you can even send out your extra staff to collect other cooking ingredients for you. But then there's just the shark heads, lurking in the distance, ruining what could have been the most relaxing endgame grind of all time. So every single opportunity, there I am, catching a single shark, returning to the surface, and repeating until I start to get dizzy from sitting at my computer for so long. I was doing most of this diving with my handy-dandy Dave the Diver themed controller that FunLabs sent me a little while ago. This controller is meant to be used with a Nintendo Switch, but it can be used with a PC like I'm doing here. And I personally found it quite comfortable in my hands when I wanted to curl into a ball and never catch another shark in my life. Also, it changes colors. And it comes with a little Marinka card so that you can have one in real life, which honestly might be my favorite part of this whole package. If you want to pick up a controller like this for yourself, there'll be a link in the description, but thanks to FunLab for sending me this cool piece. But don't worry, the white tip shark heads were not the only thing that makes 100%ing this game an absolute grind. There's also this little mini-game on Dave's phone called Gyao, and it essentially boils down to being a little Tamagotchi type thing that you need to feed, play with, and care for lest it die of being sick. Or it dies because you forgot to feed it, but we don't need to talk about my mistakes. Point is, there are 14 of these that you need to unlock via different affection and food level combinations, and of course, several of them are harder to unlock than others. Again, as a baseline explainer, you start with a little roe that does literally nothing. After 2 days, it turns into a fry, and that's where the complications start. because the fry setup is what will divide that pool of 14 possible gyao into 2 pools of 7, depending on which color of fish you evolve from that fry. It'll turn into an orange fish if its affection level is 3 or more at the transition from 2 to 3 years old, or it'll turn into a blue fish if its affection is below 3 at that same level. An orange fish can turn into these 7 gyao types, and a blue fish can turn into these 7 gyao types. Then from there, it turns into a very complicated series of determining what affection and food levels you need at what transition points to achieve those 7 gyao, some of which are incredibly specific. For instance, if we start with an orange fish, there are 26 unique combinations of food and affection levels that will lead you to a stubby squid gyao that resembles Sergio from the full game. And there are another 26 combinations of levels that will get you the trumpet fish gyao. But those are only 2 of the 7 possible gyao out of the orange fish pool. The most annoying of those is the beluga, which requires a 3+ affection level and over 9 training at the time of evolution. Those requirements themselves aren't too awful, but it's more the fact that you need the beluga to then evolve into the whale shark, which is the orange pool's rare gyao. So you not only need to hit all of the requirements for the beluga specifically, but then you also need to keep training, feeding, and playing with this gyao at every single time block until it hopefully evolves into the whale shark before it dies. And trust me, I had so many gyao that I had been attending to perfectly pass away before they hit their desired evolution. Repeat that process again and again and again and again and again for the other 7 gyao in the blue pool, including their beluga whale shark combo that requires the lemon shark to evolve into the orca. And for some reason that's beyond me, the single most frustrating gyao was actually the ribbon eel though, because I swear I went through at least 20 different permutations just trying to get this guy, but ended up just getting devilfish after devilfish after devilfish. I don't want to harp on for too long about how annoying this actually was, so just know that after enough determination and willpower, I did eventually unlock all 14 gyao, and I was endlessly grateful that I would never have to touch this mechanic again. The one good thing about grinding the gyao was that I was passing through plenty of time, which not only enabled the shark head grind, but also allowed me to make a pretty sum of money every night. And I was using that money to train up my staff. Each staff member costs just about 330,000 gold to train from level 1 to level 20, and there are exactly 24 staff members you can hire if you include the staff from the Ichiban's Holiday DLC. And that comes out to a grand total training cost of a whopping $7.8 million. Day 183 was when I finally had enough money to finish training all of my staff to max level. April Fools, it was actually the next morning on day 184, and Billy was the last to be elevated to level 20, therefore finishing out the staff side quest and unlocking all of their unique recipes. Those recipes then presented an issue of their own. You see, depending on the exact staff member we're talking about, some unlocked a new recipe at level 5, some unlocked one at level 15, and some unlocked a new recipe at both. Those recipes then needed to be unlocked via the research tab using the daily flames currency as yet another set of stuff that had to be fully unlocked and upgraded. You can only get a maximum of 5 flames per day if you have perfect restaurant service, and the vast majority of the higher level staff recipe unlocks cost 12 to 15 flames per recipe, so at least 3 days of restauranteering per recipe. And again, there were at least 24 of these bad boys, so yes, plenty more grinding. Also, I just gotta say that even though leveling the staff was a grind and mostly busy work, I did appreciate that each staff member got their own little introductory post on Cooksta once they hit level 20. I have no clue why we waited until they were level 20 to introduce them, but still it's a cute little detail. Ral's introductory post is quite cursed though. Also, my favorite cute little detail is that Raptor shakes cocktails with his dino head. I just had to share that because I really like it. But back to the issues with the staff recipes. Remember when I said, literally every other dish in the entire game can be automated to some extent? Well, I thought that was true at the time, but it turns out that there were 3 more dishes that require some extensive manual grinding. 3 dishes that all required seahorses as their main ingredient. Which, as you may have guessed, are another critter type that cannot be farmed in the aquaculture operation. The recipe listing for these says that they require long-snouted seahorses, which did freak me out a little bit because that is the name of one very specific kind of seahorse found in the shallows, but fortunately, I learned that almost every seahorse counts towards that total. And this grind was significantly less cumbersome than the white-tip sharkhead because seahorses tended to have between 2 to 5 meat pieces per catch, and on a good dive, you could catch about 10 seahorses fairly quickly. So yes, still absolutely a pain and several hours of my life that I will never get back, but fortunately not enough to make me give up entirely. Let this be a lesson that all things are possible through spite. The last facet for 100%ing this game that you definitely need to be spiteful enough to consider accomplishing is fully upgrading every weapon type. Especially because the only one that's really worth using consistently is the steel net gun that lets you catch all medium and smaller fish types at maximum quality. That means that the rest of these will never see the light of day, but I still need to craft them to consider this a true 100%. Believe me, I really didn't want to for the reasons that I'm about to explain. But remember when I was talking about those special fish drops like the white-tip sharkhead? That's where these come in, and also where they became a major pain in my behind. There are 9 different weapon types in Dave the Diver, and the vast majority of them have their own branching trees of possible upgrades, with your choices being the pure damage route, tranquilizing guns, flame guns, poison guns, or electricity variants of those weapons. And of course, those variants have their own upgrades, and those upgrades all cost various amounts of minerals, special fish drops, and assorted other stuff to unlock. And because I was determined to 100% as much of this game as is humanly possible, that also meant getting all of these weapon variants too. Let me tell you, this just about pushed me over the edge of not fully 100%ing this game, more than the Gyow, more than the seahorses, and more than the fricking white-tip sharkhead. I lost track of how many real-life days I dedicated to catching rhinochimerodons and tiger sharks just for their horns and teeth so that I could make a single poison shotgun that I would literally never use. But yet, you are seeing this video, which means that I got it done. Fortunately, the Tranquilizer gun and the Dredge DLC Drain gun were both linear paths that were pretty easy to finish, but just about everything else took way too long. So you need 5 Rhinochimerodon horns to make the Poison Sniper Rifle, then another 5 Rhinochimerodon horns to make the Poison Sticky Bomb Launcher, so on and so forth. This cycle just doesn't end for every kind of that ingredient. And please keep in mind that these are far from being guaranteed drops. From my estimate, it's about a 20% chance to actually get just that one drop. So that means a lot of manually catching fish in hopes that you get that 1 in 5 chance to get the drop you're actually looking for. Also, before anyone comes at me in the comment section, it actually isn't possible to have one of every single variant at the same time, because many of the upgrades require certain boss items that you can only obtain once per save. Take for example the tier 2 damage shotgun upgrade that requires a giant squid tooth. That's actually a beak, not a tooth, but that's besides the point. You can only get that beak by defeating the first giant squid boss, and once you've used it, there is no getting another one. So I could have one tier 4 shotgun, but I couldn't also have a tier 3 shotgun in that same save file because it would require another tier 2 shotgun to upgrade, if that makes sense. So yes, I did spend far too much time gathering every possible weapon variant, but technically I couldn't have everyone at the same time though. It's still a huge collection of stuff that I won't ever use. And also, if you're concerned about it, I did indeed finish up all of the Eco Watcher quests, all of the Sea People quests, all of the seahorse races, and all of that other little stuff, just kind of in between as I was going. None of it was particularly interesting, but trust me, it's done. So between gathering materials to make guns, farming crops to upgrade recipes, harvesting seahorses and shark heads, I was just powering through life as Dave. My only respite from the grind was the evening restaurant portions because my staff could move infinitely faster than I could, so I just occupied myself by seeing if I could match Dave's eyebrows to whatever music I was playing in the background. But eventually, I gathered the last bit of ingredients necessary to finish off my menu. And finally, at the dawn of day 313, I have fully 100% completed Dave the Diver. Every potential quest, every collectible, every Gyow, no matter how stupid they were, every weapon variant, and every single recipe unlocked and upgraded to maximum level. But with over $3 million in the bank, 11,000 likes on Cooksta, and just under 300 hours of gameplay, it is finally done. And just to be abundantly clear, I really like Dave the Diver. There's a reason that I put 300 hours into this game. That being said, I don't think it's worth it to 100%. So at very long last, I can take a break from this wonderful, wretched, delightful game. Until the In the Jungle DLC comes out next week. then I'll probably try to 100% that too. But until then, have a great day.